Only a handful of men in human history have amassed fortune comparable to Andrew Carnegie's. The net worth of a man who was as sophisticated as he was wealthy after selling his business would be a startling 2% of the GDP of the United States. In this video, we look at how one Scottish immigrant managed to escape poverty and become the richest man in the world with only 5 years of education. Despite not being an American citizen, Carnegie formerly held the record for being the richest American in history. The beginning of Andrew's journey takes place in Dunfermline, Scotland, where he was raised in conditions that can only be described as utter destitution. Before the steam-powered loom entered the scene and weaving technology quickly improved his father's loom, his mother would work non-stop making shoes, while his father would weave cloth and other materials. Industrial revolution would destroy him, causing business to collapse. The young Carnegie would be affected by seeing his father struggle while he begged for jobs. In 1848, the Carnegie family profoundly left Scotland in pursuit of a better life abroad. After selling all of their belongings and borrowing £20, the family headed out for the land of opportunity, America. They would start again in Pittsburgh, the center of manufacturing, but they would still find themselves unable to escape adversity in their new nation. As a result of his parents' struggles to find employment, Andrew was forced to quit school in order to support his family. When he got a job at her local telegraph office, he was finally able to escape the oppressive heat of the boiler rooms. He rode his bike around Pittsburgh delivering telegrams as a messenger boy. In order to be able to greet each person he delivered to by name if he ran into them elsewhere, he would memorize their faces. It would give Carnegie a rare chance to become acquainted with the city's commercial community. At age 17, he would polish his telegraphing abilities. Impressively, he became more adept at hearing Morse code and could recite messages verbatim. Thomas Scott, a regional manager for the Pennsylvania Railroad, was interested in this and employed Carnegie as his personal telegrapher and private secretary for $35 per month. The largest company in the world at the time was the Pennsylvania Railroad Company. For the astute businessman Carnegie, it represented a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. An insider's view on what makes a successful company run. Tom Scott, the boy's boss, saw Carnegie's promise and made the decision to adopt him, mentoring him as a second parent. Later, it would be Tom's recommendation to buy stocks that gave Carnegie his first experience with capitalism. Fast forward to the American Civil War, where Carnegie is drafted into the Union but chooses to profit from it rather than participate in combat. After paying $850 for replacement to take his position on the battlefield, he was able to get away from. To swap them out, he took advantage of the chance and started the Keystone Bridge Company, but it was his subsequent action that established him as a savvy businessman. In addition to building bridges, Keystone also had its own iron mills, which supplied the iron required to build the bridges. Owning the iron source meant that Carnegie's bridge-building business would not be dependent on mining or extracting companies for iron like their rivals. This not only gave Carnegie more control over the entire process, but also improved their margins. After the bridge was built, Carnegie would use his connections in the railroad industry to make money there. In essence, he was running a triad of 3 businesses, each of which strengthened the others. A mining extraction company came first, followed by a bridge construction business that used iron from his mining company, and after the bridge was constructed, his third business would generate revenue by selling rail. The idea executed perfectly. Always on the lookout for the next great chance, Andrew focused on New York, the undeniable global financial center. He went to the city expecting a hustling atmosphere and to mix with other notable businessmen, but instead he was disappointed. He thought the rich people there were scoundrels. When Carnegie turned 35, he promised himself in a note that he would retire and devote his time to improving the world. However, Carnegie never followed through on this promise. Steel could be produced in large quantities because to Henry Bessemer's creation of the Bessemer converter, a pear-shaped furnace, in 1856, Something that was previously deemed impossible, large steel constructions could now be built for the first time, giving rise to the first skyscrapers that would change the skyline of cities for all time. In order to create the first steel facilities in America, Carnegie moved quickly and employed the greatest engineers and architects
in the
money
late
could buy.
1800s, the United States was a nation on the rise. Its economic power symbolized by its railroads, bridges, and soaring skyscrapers.
To the limit of their physical
the
and mental
backbone
ability.
of this growth came from the supply of cheap and plentiful steel, as well as the relentless drive of a Scottish-American steel titan named Andrew Carnegie.
He would look for opportunities to replace his staff
Carnegie
with
was born to a
machines
poor
as
family in
technology
Scotland
continued to
and
progress.
immigrated to the United
Machines
States as
did
a
not
child.
require sleep,
Although he
beg
was
for
born into
raises,
poverty,
or even attempt
Carnegie was
unionization.
ambitious,
In
hardworking,
contrast to men,
and showed a knack
Carnegie
for
chose
making
a name
smart
for the
investments.
project.
By the time he
One of
was in his
clients
30s,
in the railroad
he was
sector
wealthy.
is called J. Edgar Thomson Steelworks.
In 1885, Carnegie founded the Carnegie Steel Company in Pittsburgh.
Demonstrate his gratitude
Carnegie
for
made
their
his mills the
patronage
most
and might
modern
even
in the
lead to more
world,
railroad
thanks in
orders,
part to his
which is
meticulous
exactly what
management
happened.
style.
The first
He
order from
significantly
Thomson
expanded his
included
company
2,000
by
steel
acquiring
rails.
most of the other
Naming a mill
nearby
after a
mills
client
and
was
raw
more than a
material
marketing
providers,
ploy.
virtually
It was a
controlling the
component of a
steel
broader
industry in
strategy.
Pittsburgh.
And the Titan's career would benefit greatly from actions like these. He would hire Henry Clayfrick, a ruthless businessman renowned for his attention to detail and the bottom line, to assist in managing the Carnegie steel plants. Together, Carnegie and Frick were a formidable force that demonstrated their capacity for ruthlessness. Go no farther than the account of how Duquesne worked with Frick according to a myth created by Carnegie. Duquesne's mill was producing steel that was subpar. Although it wasn't true, it was irrelevant. Few, if any, knew what homogeneity meant, but that wasn't important. Carnegie stated to Duquesne's railroad clients that their lines lacked it. In order to scare away railroads who were worried that they weren't obtaining high-quality products, Carnegie used the word since it sounded frightening enough to do so. Duquesne would eventually lose money if sales dropped, and they would run out of money. Carnegie and Frick would continue to undercut Duquesne on price, further pressuring the company in an effort to hasten their collapse. Duquesne's finances collapsed within 2 years, leaving it with no choice but to sell to Carnegie at a steep discount. The game strategy for Frick and Carnegie was simple: do whatever it takes to win. However, this ruthlessness came at a high cost, as they soon learned at one of their biggest steel facilities. Within Pennsylvania's Homestead's efficiency had recently been improved with millions of dollars from Carnegie, allowing it to produce more steel than any other mill of equal size. However, there was still one more area of the profit machine that needed improvement. Labor charges. This presented a challenge for Carnegie, who was trying to change the perception of himself from a repressive steel industry tycoon to a champion of workers' rights. So, rather than jeopardizing his name, Carnegie decided to detach himself by traveling to his native Scotland and delegating the nasty work to his right-hand man Henry Frick. Carnegie was aware that after lowering salaries for 10,000 already disgruntled low-paid workers, he wouldn't want to be near the plant. After an ever-widening income gap continued to rise and the wealthiest Americans amassed fortune faster than ever before in 1892, tensions between workers and mill owners were particularly high. Workers believed they were the property of the wealthy and that a union was the only way to raise their dwindling voice. Frick, who followed Carnegie's directions, made matters worse by demanding greater production hours, which would require even more labor. Their income would be reduced by Frick, who would work them harder and for less money. But when things reached a breaking point, the strikers also pushed for safer working conditions, and for good reason. 9 of all steel workers across the whole industry would pass away on the job in 1898. Frick decided to lock out every employee after the workers rejected his aggressive demands for longer hours and bring in a new group of foreign workers, who would be prepared to perform their risky professions for less money. Frick hired the Pinkertons, a 300-man hired army, to accompany the immigrant employees as they arrived at the factory. Armed, they proceeded there but were met by 10,000 irate strikers. Historians don't know who fired the first shot. But they did know that the day would later come to be known as the Homestead Massacre rather than the Homestead Strike because of their refusal to give up what they considered home. 9 factory employees and 7 Pinkertons will have died by the time the war is through, and hundreds more will have been hurt. The governor issued an order for 8,000 militiamen to act as support while being protected by state troops because the battle was so fierce. Unfortunately for Carnegie's employees, when the factory reopened, the workers would have to return to the same unsafe working conditions and lesser pay. Homestead also caused collateral harm to Carnegie's reputation since, before to the disasters at Homestead, he frequently advocated in public for improved working conditions and higher wages at steel mills. However, his behavior was very different from what he said. He championed higher wages and better safety conditions while simultaneously slashing paychecks to cut labor costs and doing little to nothing to make his plants safer. Hypocrisy was rife. Working Carnegie was heavily criticized for making Frick his scapegoat for both the disaster and all the other shady activities that he didn't want his name attached to. However, the steel mills in your area continued to prosper despite the hostilities. In fact, by 1900, the firm would manufacture more steel than the entire country of Great Britain. In contrast, Carnegie wanted to spend more time with his wife and children in 1901 and got weary of the game. Financier as he approached 70 years old, J.P. Morgan, a rising rival in the steel sector in Carnegie, became open to the thought of selling the business he had devoted his whole life to founding. What Carnegie would accept was noted on a scrap of paper. According to the legend, Morgan received the offer from Charles Schwab, president of Carnegie Steel. J.P. Morgan gave the offer a quick glance before accepting it. Morgan would go on to purchase Carnegie Steel for $480 million, making Carnegie the world's richest person. At that point, Carnegie would fully sever all links to his business life and devote himself entirely to philanthropy. With only 5 years of formal education, Andrew would have little money to leave to his family. However, he had a soft spot for libraries, which he attributes to his financial success. Over the course of his life, he donated more than 2,500 libraries to communities all over the world. But it wasn't all for self-promotion. He was kind for the sake of kindness, and his name was only on fewer than 500 of them. Carnegie Hall, one of New York City's most famous structures erected in 1891, is one illustration of his generosity. Although Carnegie built and gave the structure under the name Music Hall, the name was not changed to its final form until after his passing. However, through the Music Hall's board members, and in Lenox, Massachusetts, from 1901 until his death in 1919, Carnegie's primary occupation was dispersing the enormous money he had amassed for himself. As we indicated at the beginning of this narrative, Carnegie was a multifaceted man who was equally wealthy and powerful. Did he use oppressive labor practices to keep his companies producing at their highest levels of profit? Of course. Was he hypocritical? For sure. Although all of these things are true, it is puzzling to say the least how a man could commit such sins and then turn into a saint. Carnegie's humanitarian impact is also significant. Maybe he thought that giving his money away would make up for his mistakes in business. Thank you for watching this video. If you enjoyed, be sure to hit the like button and subscribe. Once subscribed, click on the bell icon and you'll be notified each time we upload new videos. Until next time, stay smart.